Alongside Adam Lauridsen, I'm Ravi Kapur, and the NBA Finals. We had a great matchup between the Bucks and the Suns, and the Bucks end up pulling it off 4-2, winning their first championship in 50 years, a final in Game 6 of 105-98. The story, Giannis, 50 points, truly remarkable performance. I don't think I've seen such a dominant closing performance, maybe since LeBron did it in Game 7 against the Warriors.
This wasn't the NBA Finals that I guess the NBA wanted when they started the season. Two smaller market teams, none of their biggest names to date. But it ended up, I think, being a great finals for the NBA. Giannis, as you mentioned, with really an iconic performance, securing the win, leading his team back from a 0-2 start, doing it with a knee injury that many people thought would keep him out for months. Just an incredible all-around performance. The arrival finally of an NBA champion, someone who had won the MVPs but hadn't been up to that top level. Really an incredible performance all around in a very entertaining game.
You got to admit, I mean, this is exactly what the NBA was hoping would work with their system of salary caps and free agents. And the fact that Giannis was drafted along with Chris Middleton, they developed together. As you saw on the podium after the championship was crowned, I mean, they were emotional playing together for 8 years. Giannis had some notable upsets in the playoffs. I mean, very early round upsets. He's had a great team around him for a number of years. Coaching changes. Even their coach Bud, was on the hot seat throughout this playoffs. They almost lost to the Nets in the second round. Let's face it, Kevin Durant, if he had a smaller shoe, they probably would have lost that game. They had a tough series against Atlanta, but they pulled it out despite going down 0-2. What was it about this Bucks team? Because, for most of us watching the NBA, they certainly had a heck of a lineup. I mean, a really well-balanced roster. They made some great midseason additions, P.J. Tucker, the big one, and, of course, Jrue Holiday. But what was it about the Bucks that got them over the hump this year versus previous years?
They finally gelled. All the pieces finally fit together and made sense. They had an incredibly talented roster for a number of years, but what you ultimately saw in these last 4 games is that Giannis was a dominant player, but was also creating opportunities for his teammates and working within the offense. So Middleton had a number of huge shots tonight and in previous games. Those come because Giannis is willing to share the ball and work within the system. Holiday, Bobby Portis, other players who have their roles on the Bucks, even if they're not superstars, really stepped up. And that's ultimately a testament to their system and a testament to a star like Giannis, who is willing to share with his teammates and to be both the go-to guy, but also somebody who can work within a larger team.
What's interesting about Giannis is that when we were analyzing that Bucks-Nets series, and they thought, okay, well, who's going to stop Durant? Of course, at the time, they thought they were going to have Harden as well as Kyrie, and then Harden got hurt, and Kyrie also got hurt later on in that series. But a lot of people missed the fact that who was going to guard Giannis, because Giannis just was unstoppable. And I think as this series went on against the Suns, I mean, who can actually defend Giannis? I mean, this man is incredibly explosive, and there's really no one like him in the league.
Yeah, the closest analogy I can think of is back when Shaquille O'Neal was in his prime, was a big man in the NBA who no one could guard. You could foul him, but he had a way to get to the basket for a dunk or a layup that nobody could stop. Giannis isn't the overpowering physical player necessarily that Shaq is, but he has the same undeniable way to get to the basket, and no one can stop him. He was able to capitalize on that in a way these last few games that he hasn't earlier in his career. He consistently went to the basket despite being exhausted, was able to slice up a decent Suns defense and really carry his team to victory towards the end when they were all exhausted.
Certainly, Ayton is no slouch, but he was no match, and neither was Jay Crowder, who's also a decent defensive player. So the Suns gave it their level best, but didn't have enough. And I think one thing I want to note about this performance by Giannis, I mean, 50 points is remarkable, especially in a closeout game. But he hit 17 of 19 free throws. I mean, I've never seen someone who was basically a mediocre free throw shooter with such focus and tenacity. I mean, he was ready for this moment.
Unbelievable. I think in some of our earlier analyses this series, I even said Giannis isn't going to be able to become an 80% free throw shooter overnight. He became something better than that overnight, which is really unheard of. I wonder if he heard some of the criticism. Chris Paul made a public comment before the last game about how everyone is expecting Giannis to miss his free throws when he goes to the line. Giannis certainly answered that in emphatic fashion tonight.
Let's talk about the Suns. I mean, Chris Paul did have a tremendous Game 6 tonight. Certainly his best shot at winning a title as a pro. He's 36 years old, took a young team. Let's face it, the Western Conference is really tough. No one expects the Suns to be in this position. Will the Suns have enough firepower to come back if the same squad is rolled out next year? We know the Warriors are potentially going to be healthy. Obviously, the Lakers and LeBron think they'll be right back in the mix, and all the rest of the folks in the Western Conference, if Dame Lillard stays in Portland, among other teams, the West is really hard. Was this just kind of a flash in the pan for the Suns, or do they have staying power?
They'll be in the mix. I think this is probably the best shot they're going to have with Chris Paul on the team. I think Booker and Ayton and Monty Williams as a coach have a future in Phoenix, but I don't know whether it's necessarily going to be next year, and I don't know how much longer Chris Paul is going to play. As you mentioned, the West is full of teams that are as good as Phoenix, or if healthy, better than Phoenix, I think. So it's going to be a real challenge for them to get back here. But that's why you play the games. You can never account for injuries. You can never account for streaky players. Sometimes a team gets hot and they perform well and they end up in the finals.
And even though CP3 played really well here in Game 6, he was up and down in the series. Another guy that was kind of up and down, had some great performances, but tonight a little flat was Devin Booker, who did not even hit a three-point shot. I mean, he's really like this penultimate, two guard of the future. They always measure him up to Klay Thompson, but Klay Thompson's pretty clutch in big games. Devin Booker did not hit a three and was really not a factor tonight.
That's going to be the challenge for Booker going forward. In any given game, he can be an absolutely dominant player, a superstar, a scorer like anyone else in the league, but he doesn't have the consistency yet. And there will be questions asked about whether he can step up and deliver in the highest pressure moments, like the elimination game that they just faced. But he's young, he's developing, he has a great coach. He seems to have a great approach to the game. So I think there are even better things ahead for Devin Booker.
There's a lot of great storylines, obviously, on both teams. But for the Bucks, a guy like PJ Tucker, who's had a really interesting career, certainly had a heck of a run with the Rockets and was a real thorn in the side of the Warriors for a number of years. But winning that title, Bobby Portis, who's become like the king of Milwaukee, had a tremendous performance in Game 6. Talk about some of these role players. I mean, obviously, the big man in the middle getting a ring, Lopez. This is a real interesting squad with folks that have grinded throughout the NBA experience. Sometimes they were, part of high-level teams that didn't quite get over the hump, but a lot of these guys got a chance to get their first championship.
We talked earlier about this being a satisfying win because they're a homegrown team, between Giannis and Middleton being drafted, making their career in Milwaukee. It's also satisfying because the players you listed off are a number of people who play the game the right way. They're hard-nosed. They know their role. They are good teammates. They're out there giving full effort whenever they're on the court. And it's really rewarding to see them, after careers of doing that, finally reach the highest level. PJ Tucker in particular is somebody who has improved every team he's ever been on. He's done whatever coaches have asked of him. He's sacrificed his own personal game to really become a defensive specialist and a hard-nosed player and a veteran leader. So for him, much like David West a few years ago when he finally won a ring with the Warriors, it really feels like the culmination of an outstanding, if unheralded, NBA career.
West was very underrated, I thought. Borderline, I mean, certainly an all-star type player and a heck of a contributor to that Warriors team down the stretch. So here we are, the end of the season. Still a bit of an unusual season, a shortened season. A lot of injuries. You can go back to that bubble period where they had a shortened regular season. A lot of teams came to that bubble, didn't have fans, COVID protocols extended into this season. So the last two seasons have been compromised a little bit. A lot of folks don't think what the Lakers did in the bubble really counted, and certainly some people may say this Giannis championship may have an asterisk by it as well. But the reality is the Lakers did win last year, and the Bucks did complete the regular season and and won this championship. So going into the next season, where we actually think the NBA will have a full 82-game schedule, we think that most of the teams and players that we're used to seeing will have a full complement of players. Guys like Klay Thompson are expected to be back. We would think Kyrie will be healthy. We think KD and Harden will have that super team assimilated with the Nets. They've already made odds that the Nets are the favorites for next year with the Lakers and the Bucks right after that. Where do you look at the league today, and who are you looking forward to seeing into next year?
First, I think you could sense the relief in Adam Silver's voice when he gave the trophy and said that they made it through the season. I think that there was some fear as we saw the rise of COVID cases again in the United States, that this end of the season could face challenges or be in jeopardy. So the NBA accomplished a lot getting the season done, and I think they're hoping that everything will be normal or as close to normal as possible next year, returning to 82 games with fans in stadiums. In terms of what to expect, I think these last two seasons are really a changing of an era in the NBA, and that we're seeing now with Giannis, with Booker, with Trae Young, with Jokic, with a lot of the players who we saw in the playoffs. There is a group of stars who are ready to be in their prime for the NBA. It's not just the names that we were used to over the past decade. This was the first finals, I think, in possibly a decade that didn't have Steph Curry or LeBron James in it. That's ultimately good for the NBA. They need to move on to the next generation. It's full of talent. It's full of really exciting players. This finals was a great example of what we have to look forward to in the season ahead.
And certainly the young stars played tremendously well during the playoffs, and they'll have a draft coming up in about a week, which is remarkably fast, but that's just the way the NBA rolls. I mean, they move forward very quickly onto the next season. Any players that you've looked at draft-wise that may make an impact next year that we should be looking out for?
I think it's a really deep draft. There's nobody among the top 5 or 6 who I think stands out more than anyone else. But I think that there are going to be a lot of teams that get difference makers, maybe not franchise players, but players who could really help catapult them back into competition. And again, for the NBA, I think that that's a great moment to see all of this young talent coming into the league, helping some of those teams that have been historically bad. If you look at those rosters, only a couple of years ago, the Suns were right there. They were looking for pieces to add through the draft to catapult them into competition, and they managed to do it. So for those teams at the bottom of the draft lottery, there's hope. You just need to make a few good picks and land the right talent, and you can be right back in competition.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, there's been so many amazing additions to the league of late, and we'll see if this draft will change the fortunes for some of these teams that were on the outside looking in. I mean, the Houston Rockets, who were right there battling with the Warriors, both teams ended up in the lottery, which is remarkable how fast the league changes, and now the rise of the Atlanta Hawks and now the Milwaukee Bucks with their first title in 50 years. And certainly the way Giannis was speaking post-game, he doesn't think this is the only title that they're going to win. He fully expects them to defend this championship and win a few more.
I would hope for him to respond that way. You win one, you want to go out there and get more. It's a great feeling. He obviously felt very validated by all this, as he should, and felt great for the city of Milwaukee. And if there are any Bucks fans out there, it's been a long 50 years. This has to be an incredible feeling, and I hope they get to enjoy every second of it. Next season will be next season. Right now, they should be celebrating.
Yeah, biggest streak broken between championship victories. You know, they had to go back to the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar days in Milwaukee to break this streak now 50 years later. And of course, Adam and I experienced what it was like to be there when the Warriors won about 40 years between championships. It's very special indeed, and certainly you can feel that for all the folks in Milwaukee, how emotional it was, and certainly for Giannis, his personal journey coming overseas, and really an unheralded prospect. We didn't know what he was going to become, and certainly what a performance here in Game 6, and what a performance he's had over the last few years with a couple of MVPs and leading a squad in Milwaukee, which is not really a destination for NBA players, but leading them to a title.
It's a great basketball story, but also just a great human story. He's accomplished a lot. He's overcome tremendous odds. It's wonderful to see him succeed and to do it with the support of his community and elevating those around him as well.
Well, it was a fitting end to a tremendous NBA season and a great run of the playoffs. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and certainly Game 6 really was a remarkable game on many levels, and certainly the Suns played really, really well. They have nothing to hold their heads down with. They were phenomenal, and certainly they'll be back in the mix next year, and it's something for us to look forward to. Hopefully, all of you are staying safe, and this COVID stuff will go away at some point. But I do think these protocols are probably going to be in place for a while, and hopefully next year we'll get to a full complement of games, and things will get back to some sense of normalcy between now and next year. Adam, as always, I really appreciate your time, your insight, your expertise. You can follow him at GSW Fast Break on Twitter. And, it's the end of the season, so I guess we'll have to talk about the season ahead. And certainly I hope this time next year we're physically at the games to enjoy this experience, because there's really nothing like being there at the clinching games.
I hope the next time we're doing this, it's back on the floor together with an arena as our backdrop instead of these virtual backdrops or home offices. It would be great to get back to it.
Absolutely. Well, for Adam Lauridsen, I'm Ravi Kapur. Congrats to the Milwaukee Bucks, the champions of the 2021 season. We'll see you guys next year.